LEdit video training series. This is video number 1. This will be the introduction to the software interface and just some of the basic CAD concepts that we'll be using throughout the process. So let's just go ahead and get right into it. When you come to the NanoFab, you'll find two computers that have an icon similar to this on the desktop. Clicking this will launch the LEdit program. Sometimes you may have to wait a second for it to find a license. Sometimes it may find it right away, depending on how many people are using the software in and around the facility. When you do open up your LEdit window, you should see an interface that looks something like this. It may not be exactly the same. Some of the toolbars may be in a different position. Some may be visible, some may be hidden. So we'll go ahead and we'll start taking a look at the toolbars that we see here by default, and also how to activate some of the other hidden ones should you desire to do so. Alright, so when we first launch LEdit, you are going to see a layer palette on your left-hand side that should look something like this. If you're working in NanoFab, you're going to find 10 drawing layers, basically just named layers 1 through 10. We've created a design environment file that provides you 10 drawing layers that you can use for creating your features. If you're not working in NanoFab or you're using the default design environment supplied with LEdit, it's going to look quite a bit different. You may have quite a few layers, and they will have typically names like Metal 1, Metal 2, Vias, Polys, all these different names that are associated with actual materials. In our case, since we're doing our own fabrication, our own processing, we don't have any association with any distinct materials for each layer, so you're free to draw whatever you like on whatever layer you like, because you'll be doing your own processing later on. Okay, so when you first open it up, chances are that you're not able to see all these columns. There's a little nuance with the layer palettes here that you can't resize them while they're attached. So generally when you first open up, they may look something like this, and you only see just the first row. Just grab it here and detach it, and you can resize it if you like, if you wish to see some of the other information here. Some of this stuff is not extremely necessary, and you may or may not wish to take up some of your valuable drawing real estate on your screen with it. But just taking a quick look at the layer palette here, along this column what we have is the GDS2 number that's associated with each layer. You'll note that some of the layers do not have an associated GDS2 number with them. Double-clicking any one of the layers will bring up your Setup Layers dialog box. Now in here you see that there are also a few layers that are actually, well, they're not really hidden, but they're just off to the side in the layer palette. These are used for the internal layers of the software. For example, grid layer is where your grid points are drawn. Origin is where the little crosshairs are drawn. Some of the internal layers that we're going to basically stay away from. These layers, you see, you'll note, do not have a GDS2 number associated with them. Layers 1 through 10, the viable drawing layers, do. Now this number is, at this point in time, it's not important to concern yourself with the actual number, but just do ensure that when you are drawing your features for your design, that you select a layer that does have a GDS2 number associated with it. Only features that are drawn on a layer with a GDS2 number will be exported at the end of the day to your GDS2 file. So as we see, the outline and the ruler layers do not have one. And one thing you cannot do is you can't just draw on an arbitrary layer and then choose some random number and punch it in there and then hope that that's going to be exported. That will not work. So basically you just have to make sure that you choose an appropriate layer, and then you can continue drawing in that way. Some of the other tabs here are a little bit have some more advanced features. If you like, you can play with them. They just basically set things like the rendering, so the drawing, the fill, colors, patterns, stuff like that. For all intents and purposes, it's probably not necessary to play with any of those features, but you are more than welcome to go ahead and change the colors if you should decide to do so. So that's the layer palette here. Some of the other stuff that we see here is we can have a little select box here. This is just essentially to filter out some of the layers, so we can show all layers. If you're working in a particular cell, you can only show the layers used in a cell or used in a file. If we select this, we have nothing right now because we haven't drawn anything in our design file. We can also filter, so if we wish, we can eliminate some of these, and this was just by, if we type layer, that should filter out any of them that doesn't have the word layer in it. Layer 1, layer 2, pretty simple text filtering. So that's what that field there is for. Down here, there's a couple of buttons that just basically toggle the selectability of some of the elements in your design. So with this instance button here, we can, if it's got the little red guy there, all your instances will no longer be selectable in your design. If you want to lock them in place, it's a quick way of doing that. You can also lock individual layers, you can sort individual layers, and you can also sort by selectable layers here. This little drop down box here, there is an ability in the software to create custom layer palettes, and that's what this would be here. You can set up different layer palettes. We'll just stick with the standard one for now, and I'm just gonna make it a little bit more narrow, a little narrower here, because I'm not truly interested in any of those, but I'll stick the GDS2 number there, and we'll pop that back on the side. Just moving down the left panel here, the other boxes that we'll see here. This box here displays the associated commands with the mouse buttons. So right now both my left and right buttons are going to allow me to select an object. At times they will change. They are, I guess you can call them context sensitive. So as we go through our design, we'll see these buttons change, and I'll point that out a little more clearly when there's something to select. Down here we have an aerial view. So this just shows us where we are in terms of our overall design in our cell. Okay, so that's basically our layer palette, some of the selectability functions down the left-hand side. Starting across the top of our menu, you'll note that all the toolbars are detachable, floating, draggable, sort of a common thing with software these days. So starting on the left-hand side here, we'll just cruise across the toolbars and go into a little bit of explanation of what all the buttons mean. Okay, so first we have the selector. So by clicking on that, we'll be able to just select objects. And then the next thing we're going to have here are our primitive polygons. So there are 7 primitive polygons. 4 of them are angular and 3 of them are curves. So what these do is these basically just allow you to draw your basic shapes. You can draw circles, squares, toroids, all the basic building blocks that you'll need to create your design as you work through LEdit are found there. There are also three buttons here that are called wire tools. Now, just sort of take a minute here to illustrate the difference between a wire and a box or a polygon in LEdit and the way it's defined. A wire, if I just hit Control E, which brings up my object editor dialog box, a wire in LEdit is defined by only 2 points. It's got the start point and the end point. And then this third parameter of width defines the thickness of the wire. Now this parameter can be specified per layer, but there are also a couple of different nuances with wires, such as a join style and the end style. And some of these parameters don't translate consistently, let's say. So we have experienced problems with some of the wire types being exported and being used in people's designs. So at the end of the day, what I would recommend, or what we would recommend, is just to use boxes, because what you can do is you can create the same shape using a box. Because what happens is if that width or parameter doesn't get exported properly, you end up with a feature that only has 2 points and it has no thickness, so it's really only a one-dimensional feature, and in that case you end up with nothing on your mask. So to be very sure of our geometry, if we select the box here, we'll see that it's defined by 4 corners, and so we're very sure of the width and the height of that box when we do export this feature into our final design. So if at all possible, I would definitely recommend avoid using the wire tools. If for some reason you find that it's absolutely necessary that you do this, one thing that you can do is before you're done, you can, under the Draw menu, convert to polygon. And then what that will do is that will take that one-dimensional feature with a width parameter and translate it into a polygon with 4 points, thus ensuring that we are accurate in our geometry when we export this design or this feature. The drop-down box here basically specifies the default wire width if we were to play with the wires, so we can basically specify some other width or use the default for that layer. In this case, the default for layer 1 is 2 microns. Sometimes you may come to the LEdit software interface and find that you don't see all those 7 primitives. If, for example, only 45 degrees is selected, we're only going to see 3 of them there. So right-clicking in that area will bring up the toolbar menu, and what we can do is you can see that even if we clicked orthogonal, it's even more restrictive. So what we want is we want all angles and curves. That's going to make sure that we have access to all 7 of our primitives there. So that's the drawing primitives. You'll use those consistently throughout your design to basically build up your geometries and your features. So moving along to the right here, the next icon that we're going to come across is a port labeler. Now, LEdit itself is one piece of a larger software package provided by Tanner Tools, and LEdit basically stands for Layout Editor, and it in conjunction with the other tools, it does offer quite a few powerful features that we don't harness. For example, you can do net listing, 3D modeling, parasitic extractions, LVS, DRCs, all kinds of good stuff. In essence, we really only use it in its most basic form to draw geometries. So the port labeler itself is actually intended to create net lists for simulation or LVS. Inadvertently, some people may use this in an attempt to add labels to their design, but this is not the way to do it. Unfortunately, we can't really hide that button, but if you try to add text to your mask like this is not going to show up in your final design. It will not be exported. So what we want to do, if you do wish to add text, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but just real quickly, under Draw, Layout Generators, we have Layout Text Generators, and what this allows you to do is type in an arbitrary text string, assign it to a layer, instance it in a cell, create the line height, let's say 10 microns, and you can also add some extra things like the date, copyrights, underlines. And what this does is this takes your text, renders it as a group of polygons. So these polygons, this text now will show up on your final design. And what it's done is it's actually created it in a cell called text and instanced it into our current working cell. Okay, so moving along now, what we've got next are 3 ruler tools. By default, the grid is set to 1 micron for every minor division and 10 microns for every major division. So the units that your working units, I should say, are set by this drop-down box right here. So by default it's in microns, and at the lower levels it's probably very convenient to work in microns, but if you should choose, you can work in millimeters, mils, even inches, centimeters. It gets a little crowded at this point, but once you move up to your final floor planning, it's often convenient to work in inches, but at this stage microns is generally convenient, I guess depending on the scale of your design. And then we've got a 45-degree ruler and an all-angle ruler, and these guys just basically allow you to measure stuff. Now, just a note that this, again, would not show up in your final design, so if you wanted to actually create a ruler that would be printed onto your mask, you would have to do that out of polygons and not with the ruler tool itself. The next icon here, moving along to the right now, is the instance icon. This will allow you to create to instance an existing cell in your design into the current working cell. I'm going to come back to this one in future videos and spend a little bit more time talking about cells and instances, because they are a rather important concept to working with LEdit. But just a note about them in general is that a cell can be anything in your design, from a single design element to your entire design. And LEdit is made up of cells. You can view your design hierarchy here. We'll come to that one in a second, but essentially clicking this button will bring up your instance cell dialog. It's exactly the same as pressing the shortcut key I or going under cell instance. We'll come back and talk about that one a little bit more in the future here. Alright, the next group of icons we have here, starting from here over to here, is basically for flipping, duplicating, rotating any of your shapes. So if I have a shape here, I can mirror it, flip it horizontally, arbitrarily, some random angle. I can also flip vertically or duplicate it, which would be the same as hitting Control-C, Control-V. I can also slice my polygons using the little slicer tools here. You can slice horizontally or vertically. So this basically breaks this polygon up into a number of smaller polygons that I can manipulate individually. The next guy here is Nibble. So what Nibble does is Nibble allows you to take chunks out of an existing polygon. So if I wanted to, for example, cut a slit out of this polygon here, I just can select the little Nibble button here, and we note that my mouse buttons have now changed to Nibble, cancel, cancel. And so with this I can draw on top of it my slit that I wish to cut out, and it will cut that out for me and reform my polygon. It's a one method of knocking shapes out. There's another method using the Boolean operators that allows you to do a similar thing, and also some more advanced features. We'll come back to the Boolean operations in a little bit more detail, but just know that Nibble can also be used, works with curves as well. So if I wanted to nibble a circle out of this type of substrate, I can select it and I can nibble a circle out. Now do note that it's going to change it into a polygon, an approximation of the circle, and it doesn't look very pretty at this point in time. And in a future video, when we discuss curves and circles, we'll explain how to work around this approximation of curves. So for now, we'll just leave it at that. The next, moving along to the right here, the next icon that we have is Merge. So what Merge does is Merge will take any number of polygons and merge them into a single polygon. So by clicking this, I will take my 4 polygons here and merge them into a single polygon. And now a similar operation is grouping. I'm just going to undo that one. There's a subtle difference between grouping and merging. When I merge polygons together, I am no longer able to manipulate the individual polygons that make up that new one. If I choose to group polygons together, what happens is LEdit is going to create a new cell. I'll call it my group, and it is going to take those 4 individual pieces, plop them into my new cell, and then instance that cell in my current working cell. So now I have an instance called my group, and if I want to manipulate the individual elements of this, I still can. I can do that. I'm just jumping ahead to my design navigator here, selecting the cell my group, and we see that I can manipulate each of these instances, each of these polygons on their own. Sorry. I can also do that in place here. So that's a little bit of a difference. So merging, you're down to 1 polygon. Grouping, you still have all of your original polygons put into a cell. And I can do the opposite. I can ungroup them, and now I have my 4 original polygons back here. I do still have my original group as well, though, so I've retained both. Okay, so moving along to the right, the next icon that we're going to see here is the Edit Objects button. This is exactly the same as hitting Control-E, which is the keyboard shortcut for that, so that brings up the Edit Objects dialog. And depending what type of object you currently have selected, the appropriate tab will be brought up. In this case, we have a polygon selected, so we get the Polygon tab. If we were to have a circle selected, as you can expect, we get the Circle tab, and same is true for instances. So I personally find Control-E to be quite a bit quicker. So learning the keyboard shortcuts often can save you some time in the design process. All right, moving along, the next icon that we're going to see here is Move Objects by a specific amount. So this allows you to basically get surgical with your moving. If I want to move this object by specifically 0 microns to the right and 1 micron up in the Y direction, I can do so like this. Another way to move objects is with the mouse. If you note down here now, we see Select, Move, Select. So my middle mouse button, if you have a 3-button mouse, is now able to move this object. So by clicking that, I can move it. Now I will note that here is one of those context sensitive points. So if I get close to the edge, you notice that the cursor there changes in the middle. And over here as well, if we watch there, it's going to change from Move to Edit. So as I get close to the edge of the object, if I press the middle button, now I'm actually editing the shape. So if you're not prepared for that, it can cause some unexpected side effects if you expect to move it and you start changing the shape of things. So just do be aware of that one. And one thing that when that can tend to sometimes cause a problem is when you are working with really, oh, now it doesn't want to move at all. is when you're working with small cells, for example, something that might be 1 micron by 1 micron. When I work with a really small cell like that, basically the threshold for moving and editing is 1 micron. So as I select this, now you see there's nowhere in here that I can actually move this. Anywhere I click my middle button, I'm actually editing that object. Alright, I apologize for the slight little glitch there in the video. I had a brief technical difficulty, so we're back on track and carrying on with the LEdit introduction here now. So that covers the move by icon there, which just as you can note can help sometimes when you're dealing with small features in the 1 micron range. So we'll just keep moving along then, and the next thing we come across is a group of icons that is going to help us in terms of alignment. So from here over to here we have basically align icons. So what we can do with these is we can select a group of shapes, for example these shapes right here, and we'll just give ourselves a little bit of room to work. We can select these and we can perform basic operations like align to the left, center, or right, and we can also do the same thing in the vertical plane as well. If we have horizontal items like so, we can align them top vertically or their centers. That's pretty basic functionality there. One of the other things that we can do is we can tile our objects. Tiling is similar to aligning, except that what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate any dead space in between them. So if I choose to tile these objects, what we're going to do is we're going to get our objects placed adjacent to each other, aligned along one of our edges. In the end, this is going to result in a single shape. If you were to fabricate this feature, you're going to end up with one single looking feature in your design. The other things we have here are distribute. We can distribute either horizontally or vertically by a specific value. So if we want, we can separate them by a specific value. We can create the minimum distance. We can distribute by the edges or by the pitch, depending on how we want to distribute those shapes. One little quick note on aligning features. When you do select your features, you can determine, when you want to align them, you can determine which feature you're aligning to, basically as a function of which object was selected. So if I go to align and options, I can see here that I can align relative to basically the largest object or the last selected object. So if I want to make sure that I'm aligning everything to this box right here, what I want to do is I want to select these other ones first, and then by holding shift I can select this one last, and then when I select my alignment, everything should move to that one, and that wasn't the case. What did we have? Let's just double check our alignment options here. Right, because we had essentially most of the items. So if I select the last selected object there, now we should be aligning to the last selected object. So that's just a little quick note in terms of aligning, that you can determine which object you're aligning to through the alignment option dialog there. Alright, so that takes care of the alignment and tiling options here. Then moving along here, we saw that we can change the display units using this drop down here. Right here we just see our mouse coordinates, so basically wherever our mouse is in our cell, we'll just have the coordinates displayed there. This next group of icons is for working with cells, except for this one. This first one here will open up your documentation. So the documentation for LEdit is pretty thorough and pretty good. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, or if you're having any problems that aren't solved through the NanoFab's documentation or these training videos, highly suggest that your first source should be to the LEdit documentation, which is very good. Beside that, we have the ability to generate a cross-section view of the cell. And again, I noted earlier that LEdit can perform some advanced features, one of those being process modeling. This will basically build a 3D cross-section of your design based on your processing parameters. We really don't get into that function as well, so we're going to leave that one for advanced users. If they want to explore that later on, you can feel free to do that. Moving along here, we have regenerateT cells. What T cells are is T cells, basically you could describe your cell in terms of VHDL or code or some sort of LEdit scripting language. And what this will do is this will basically allow you to regenerate your parameterized cells. We don't have any of those, and again, that's an advanced topic that we're not going to cover in the scope of this video. Carrying along, we have some copy and open cell buttons. So clicking on this icon will allow you to copy a cell from either an external file or one of your current cells and just essentially copy it into a new cell. And beside that, you can open an existing cell. In our case, we just have the 2 cells in our design right now. So those 2 are for opening and copying. You can work with all of the cell functions in the Design Navigator as well. So looking in the Design Navigator, you'll have the options to create new cells, delete cells, copy, show all cells. Actually, copy to text view, what that will do is that will copy your hierarchy basically into a text file for reference in the future. This drop down button here and this button here work to allow you to show or hide various depths of your hierarchy. Now this can be useful for rendering speeds and efficiency. So for example, if you have a design that is quite dense with a number of instances, what you can do is you can decide to only show certain levels. So for example, if I choose one level, we had my text right here. What we're doing is we're now only displaying the top level. We only want to render the top level cell that we're working in. So we can select one level, and every other cell beneath that in our hierarchy is just going to be grayed out and shown by an outline box. And what that does is that just saves CPU power, which allows you to render your design a lot faster. If you're doing a lot of moving around in a fairly dense design, you can just save some of the rendering by selecting the depth there. So generally speaking, all levels will show everything. This one here basically jumps to one level if you want to turn that button on and off. Okay, continue along. The next button here will turn your mouse into a zoom tool. So by clicking this, we see that now our 3 mouse buttons are: we can zoom to a box, we can pan, or we can zoom out. Or just by clicking the left or right mouse button, we can zoom in once. And then clicking that again, we can get back our mouse tool. Every time you click the button, your mouse returns to the select tool. So oftentimes it's a lot easier to just use plus and minus and the arrow keys to navigate around. Myself personally, I find that to be a lot quicker. So minus will zoom out, plus will zoom in, arrows to move around. But you can also use this if you want to just zoom into a specific area real quickly. Moving along then, the next group of icons, this one here is to go to a specific point. So if I want to center, for example, the origin represented by the crosshair into the center of my working space, I can just do that. So, and what that will do is whatever coordinates I enter in that box will be centered into my working area. The next group of icons here are for finding stuff. So if you've created instances that you've named, or you want to reference them by cell names, or if you want to search on certain layers for various primitive features, you can use the find dialog to do that. So if I want to search for, I don't recall actually what we called the text object. I think it was just text there. So if I want to search for something by name, I could search for cell name text, and hopefully it finds it. There it is there. So that's just another side note there. When you're instancing cells in your design, it is handy to name them, and it does make finding them later on quite a bit easier. The next 2 buttons here we saw a little bit earlier. So this is for editing in place or popping and pushing through your design hierarchy. So right now we have an instance my text. So if I want to edit this in place, I can select edit in place, and what that will do is that will jump down in my hierarchy into this cell itself. So now I can edit the individual pieces of this polygon, but I'm still able to see the rest of my design around it. So although I can't select any of this, it's helpful as a guide in terms of placement. And also up in the top of the window, you'll note that the path to the working cell is displayed here. So I'm in cell 0/text. The other way to edit individual cells, of course, would be to open up the cell itself in the Design Navigator. And I'm not sure where my text actually is. So we'll just jump out of that and go back to our editing in place. which is here. So that's just a handy way to edit cells with respect to the rest of your design. And we can jump back up, and now we're working in cell 0 here, and now I can access the other features in my design, and this is treated once again as a single instance. The remainder of the icons here should be familiar. They're standard windows. You've got copy, cut, paste, save, open, new, undo, redo, and the basic buttons that you would expect in any Windows application. So that covers the basic toolbar buttons that you'll find in your design. Right clicking up here, you'll see that there are a number of other toolbars that we don't use and we didn't discuss in this video just because they're outside of the scope of what we generally do in the NanoFab. You're more than welcome to read up on some of these and see if they would be useful for you in your design. But generally speaking, the toolbars that are displayed by default are going to be the ones that you're using in your design. So that wraps up the introduction to LEdit and the general interface. We'll be delving into some of these individual topics and some more tips and tricks a little bit more in the future. So thank you very much.